Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Year over year for Call of Duty, we obviously know that there's several changes that happen based on who is creating any given game, right? Between the 3-year cycle that we've got now with Treyarch, Infinity Ward, and Sledgehammer, of course, every game still feels like Call of Duty, but there are various tweaks over each game every single year that make it feel more unique to that specific developer. Obviously, Treyarch has that bit more of an arcadey feel. Infinity Ward likes to have some more realism, but they've also kind of had an identity crisis over the past couple of games. Sledgehammer oftentimes is a bit more fast-paced and action-packed than maybe an Infinity Ward game, maybe a nice mix between Treyarch and Infinity Ward, kind of bridging the gap there. However, we've recently got some new rumors, some new leaked information about the future of Call of Duty that detail some very interesting changes. Basically, an overhead update that's going to impact every single Call of Duty. Ideally, like Call of Duty likes to do, in theory, make things more seamless and streamlined year over year, and actually, surprisingly, shift quite a bit of focus year over year to areas that have been major talking points, major focus points for a lot of complaints from the community, especially in years past. So this information is all stemming from the Ghost of Hope. He is a leaker in the community that we've talked about for a long time, and he's got a pretty credible track record up until this point. At the end of the day, keep in mind, this is all generally long-term stuff, so, you know, things could absolutely change over the years as we see this sort of idea executed throughout the studios. And also, it's just leaks and rumors as of now. So, of course, none of this is officially confirmed, and these kind of subjects will probably never be officially confirmed. It's just something we either see come to fruition in the coming years or we don't, and it's kind of that straightforward, right? But with this, as we do dive into the details, if you enjoy the video, a like rating is always seriously appreciated. Much love to everyone who does take the time to do so. It really does help out the channel. And if you're new here, you want to guarantee that on a day-to-day basis, you are always in the know for everything going on in COD. This is your one-stop shop for that. So feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. Join us on the road to 1 million subscribers. But here's a tweet that the Ghost of Hope posted the other day that pretty much sparks this entire conversation. He says, "Here's what I'm being told about the future of Call of Duty. Microsoft has set up a new committee under Activision for Call of Duty that will control the features and systems at the franchise level and then let the studios make suggestions." So essentially, there is now a team that oversees Infinity Ward and Treyarch and Sledgehammer for various different elements of the game, different features and different systems that'll be implemented across the board. It's no longer Infinity Ward does this and then it also carries over a little bit into a Black Ops title or a little bit into a Sledgehammer title, or Treyarch does this and they make Omni movement, for instance, then that carries over. And in fact, Hope kind of follows up with that saying, so whether something like Omni movement, which is new to the franchise, survives past this year will be decided not by Infinity Ward or by Treyarch, but this committee. So this is actually an interesting talking point because there were some rumors that surfaced a while back. We actually covered them in a video. I think it was just prior to Black Ops 6 about how Infinity Ward's next title, which currently is slated for 2026, is kind of at a standstill because Infinity Ward is not a fan of what Activision is trying to push them to implement, which presumably is Omni movement. Obviously, as we saw with MW 2022, Infinity Ward likes concrete boots on all players. They don't want movement for whatever reason, and so there must have been some pushback there, potentially when this new committee said, hey, you guys need to be working with Omni movement for your next title, and they're like, well, but we don't want the players to run around. We like the Sentinels, right, as they referred to them with MW 2022. So very interesting that there's kind of this top-down oversight from every studio now that directly comes from Microsoft and Activision. Now, Hope continues by saying, studios are being told not to innovate in areas like UI or prestige or certain gameplay features. I would imagine that stuff maybe like some gunsmith stuff, like you know, Omni movement right now, for instance, and rather to focus on innovating with maps and new modes and storytelling, as that is where they want the creativity to come from. So this is a pretty interesting situation. As with most things like this, I think there are some pros that could stem from this. I think there are some cons that could stem from this. Hope does also follow up in response to one of them. One person on Twitter said, don't innovate the UI area, you know, bring it back to that classic UI. Black Ops 6 obviously is pretty similar to some of that stuff that we've had before. If you want to consider like MW 2019 UI Classic. That was one that a lot of players enjoyed. And then, of course, they tried to shift away from that, and the UI has been a disaster for the last couple of years. Hope does say they are going to continue to bring that UI closer and closer to the old games from what I know. So that's just one of those examples where instead of focusing every single year, we've got to do so much to change the UI simply for the sake of change, which is something we've seen a lot of, particularly under Infinity Ward. Instead, they're actually focusing where change is needed. So the classic prestige system, if that goes over well and players enjoy that and Call of Duty sees good retention numbers from that, it's not something that needs to be innovated. They're going to say, hey, don't focus on prestige, keep that as is, it works. The UI, for instance, we just had this whole overhaul with Black Ops 6. Hey, if players like it, which it seems like they do for this year, don't focus on that, focus on other areas. And the ones that Hope lists here, of course, are maps and modes and storytelling. Areas that for the past couple of years have been under fire quite a bit, particularly with maps. I mean, Black Ops 6, this is a game that's got some maps. I think that's just the best way to phrase it. There are maps. However, are they good? The vast majority of the community says no for the vast majority of the maps in the game, right? There are very few that players want to actually vote for in that pre-game lobby, right? Or modes. It's always a big talking point as well. Could we see the return of all these classic modes, or why do we have to wait until season 3 or 4 every year to get things like maybe Infected or Prop Hunt or other party games or stuff like that, right? Could there actually be innovation there that brings in new modes into the CDL so you don't have to play the same couple of modes there that some of the pros are not big fans of to begin with? I think that shift is actually really, really good news, focusing on areas that a lot of the player base has been pretty vocal they're not a huge fan of in the past couple of years, instead of just changing things for the sake of change, like with UI or the prestige or certain other things like that. Where this does get interesting, though, is that committee that oversees the major stuff. So Omni Movement is one of the big examples there. This committee's saying, hey, Omni Movement is going to be our thing going forward. So we like how it plays in Black Ops 6. We like how it translates to Warzone. That means COD 2025, which also rumors say presumably is Treyarch. You're sticking with that. And I'm sure Treyarch is not opposed to that since they created the system. But then COD 2026, Infinity Ward, you're sticking with Omni Movement. But we don't want to stick with Omni Movement. Well, this is why the committee exists. You're going to do it. The players like it. We're going to stick with it. COD 2027. Well, okay, maybe we're growing tired of Omni Movement now. Let's shift things up. Let's go back to that MW 2019 feel of movement, maybe, That's going to be an interesting dynamic going forward, because even now we already have rumors saying there's pushback to some of those, ideas there, and some of that, forced gameplay updating, gameplay design with probably Omni Movement in specific. But then that could apply to other things, whether it be the gunsmith and how that's going to work. All weapons from a certain game are going to use 5 attachments, and there's going to be a pick 10 system, so you get a couple of perks. You could go all in on attachments, whatever the case is there. Then they want that to be a main feature crossing into Warzone, crossing into the next year's titles. So I think the way that they're designing this and the way that they're pushing for this is that this will create a more seamless experience year over year for Call of Duty, meaning that COD 1 year, 2025 to 2026, still feels like a very similar game at its core, but it's a main content focus that shifts instead of the entire gameplay design. And I think the way that they view that is that if the game feels a certain way and players really enjoy it, we don't have to worry about the feel of the next game being a complete 180 and everyone hating that. We kind of saw that with MW 2022. Everyone liked the feel of COD during the previous era. Obviously MW 2019, especially Cold War, then even Vanguard, all felt relatively different from one another, but the gameplay, especially like in Warzone with all the integrations there, still felt essentially the same across the board. And then you have this huge shift in MW2 where things slow down drastically, and the game has the largest player base drop off in the history of COD, right? The game just completely flops after a month and does irreparable damage to the franchise as a whole, which Infinity Ward's going to have a tough time bouncing back from, I think, in terms of community trust in 2026. It's going to be an interesting dynamic to see it just play out in general. I think it's going to be very obvious what's been affected by this committee and what had a lot more focus as opposed to something like UI or Prestige year over year. If maps 1 year really shine, it's like, I wonder if they were told to focus a lot more on map design, or I wonder if they were focused a lot more on modes or something this year. So Very interesting news for the future of Call of Duty for sure. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. Very curious to get your thoughts on this though down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, a like would be seriously appreciated. And of course, if you're new to the channel, you want to guarantee that every single day you are in the know for all things going on in Call of Duty, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your way out. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.